the water inside of our bodies is different than water in a glass, right? Like water in a glass sloshes around. It's like this liquid structure. And most of us, again, what this goes back a ways. Like, I don't know when the first time I learned that water can exist as a liquid, a solid, and a gas. But water can also, now we know, inside of our bodies exist in a fourth phase that has been called many names. It's been called structured water. It's been called exclusion zone or EZ water. It's been called interfacial water. But what you need to know about it is that the water inside of our body organizes and structures it, the oxygens and the hydrogens, in a way that actually provides our body with energy.
Hey, welcome to the Bodies Built Better podcast. I'm your host, Jackie Tan, and I'm pumped that you're with me today. This show is all about human performance. And I've recently had a few people ask me, well, does human performance mean athletes? You talk with athletes, it's an athletic podcast. And I was thinking about this, and it's no. The short answer is no, absolutely not. But the long answer is, human performance is more than just the physical. It's more than getting out for your run or doing your exercise or eating, good food. Human performance encompasses so many things. I mean, we're human, right? So we have a whole lot of layers to uncover, and human performance can be the physical. It can also be the mental. It can be the emotional, the spiritual. I mean, it's everything that has an impact on ourselves and on our performance. And for me, it's about talking with incredible people from all different walks of life and background and education to bring you the best tips and tools around how you can apply that to your life and your journey. So this podcast, I want you to be able to go, that's really cool. I'll be able to apply that. Oh, yes, that's what I have been doing. This is how I can tweak it. Or on the flip side, I never thought of that. That's what I'll do next, or that's what I'll try. And that's what this is about. It's about bringing you the information and the tools and strategies that you can apply and explore in your own life and health and well-being and get the best from you. And all of that should probably be in a trailer episode, but here we are. And today on the show, I chat with quantum biologist Carrie Bennett. Carrie has a clinical practice in Kalamazoo, Michigan, working with clients to improve their health. And if you are at all intimidated by the word or term quantum biology, then join the club, because that was me up until having this conversation. And what I learned very quickly, well, that's not necessary, because Carrie breaks down what quantum biology is and how we can apply it to our health, our well-being, and how simple it is to tweak just a few things that we already do for better or optimal health. And that's what I love about this conversation. Carrie explains the best ways to optimize our body on a foundational level or extracellular level, so that everything else that we do, that being the food we eat, the water we drink, the exercise that we do, all have an even bigger and better impact because we've built strong, healthy foundations. And I'm all about strong foundations. We also cover sunlight and light therapy, mitochondrial health, understanding water on a quantum level, so the difference between the water inside our body and the water we drink, how we can drink all day but still be dehydrated, and how our words and thoughts play an incredibly important role in our health and well-being. And I'm so excited for you to hear the research around this. I loved this episode, and we really only scratched the surface of the impact of water, sunlight, and its influence on our health and biological systems. So there is no doubt I'll be speaking with Carrie again, because she's absolutely wonderful and incredible in sharing this knowledge in a way that does make it easy to understand. So let's dive straight in with quantum biologist Carrie Bennett. Carrie, thank you so much for chatting with me today. Welcome to the Bodies Built Better podcast.
Oh, thank you, Jackie. I'm so excited to dive in.
I'm so excited. I was pumped when you said yes, you'd come onto the show, but there was also a bit of nervousness and panic because I thought I'm so out of my depth here and I'm not sure how I'm even going to go about this. But that's what I love about you and what you do in your work. You're so great at explaining. I mean, we're talking about quantum healing today, and you're so good at explaining all of this. And your Instagram is a wealth of information, and I'm learning more. But I'll be completely honest, if there's any blank stares today, you might have to repeat. But I'm so looking forward to this. Let's start with a bit about you and your background. How did you get into this line of work?
I didn't wake up, one day and said, "Hey, I want to study quantum biology," right? It kind of found me. Anyone who's kind of on this knowledge journey or this healing journey, at some point we reach a wall or potentially a barrier that we have to overcome in maybe traditional methods of healing. And my barrier, it kind of, I guess they were just little hills to overcome. After I graduated from college, I just, nothing ever felt great. I was an athlete, kind of in disrepair. I would have joint pain and chronic dislocations and insomnia. And I just said, okay, that's what happens when you're a college athlete, right? And over the course of the next 5 or 6 years, I became a massage therapist, a personal trainer. I did coaching certifications in things like breathing, and none of it really made me feel awesome. Like, I felt good and I looked healthy. You look at a personal trainer, right? You look at me, you're like, oh yeah, she's really healthy, right? I just felt like my energy levels should match the quality of my sleep should match all that. And then fast forward to when my first child was born about 11 years ago. After he was born, I developed the worst fatigue of my life. It was this horrible combination of chronic fatigue plus insomnia. So it's like I'm physically exhausted, but I can't sleep. My digestion was a mess, puffy, bloated, in pain, like you name it. And I wasn't satisfied with the answer of, oh, this is what a new mom is supposed to feel like, or, oh, this is what happens as you get older. So like any good nerd, right? Like any good nerd, I was like, I went on a journey. And the first place I went was into nutrition. I got a master's degree in applied clinical nutrition, thinking that would really move the needle. And it did a little bit, right? I do think nutrition is important. All these modalities I think are very important, but I still didn't wake up in the morning and feel like, yeah, like I got the energy to, like, rock it today, right? I was still just trying to make it through the day. And it was probably around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm like on scrolling on my phone, and it's like, why am I not sleeping? Why is my child not sleeping? Why do I have low energy? Like the journey that we go down to figure it out for ourselves. And I stumbled upon the work of Dr. Jack Kruse, who is he's a neurosurgeon, and he has spent the past decade really piecing together what we call quantum biology. And the fact that, the quantum world kind of used to exist in these cold, dark rooms, in these very, very controlled conditions. And now we know that our human bodies are quantum bodies. And he introduced me to the concept of my body needing light on so many levels. And I started to apply it. Sounded too good to be true, but it literally moved the needle in a matter of days, to the extent where my fatigue was gone, my sleep was better, and I knew I had stumbled upon a rabbit hole that I really wanted to dive down. And here I am now, like trying to spread the beauty of quantum health to the world.
Yeah, and you're doing it so well. And I think that's what attracted me to you and your work, because I have such a similar story and journey, in the sense that I'm also a massage therapist, I also do the training part. I've also looked into nutrition as well. You did the master's degree. I haven't gone that far, but and now I've come across you and your work, and it really is, yeah, it's like it is that missing puzzle piece, because there's so many instances where clients have come in and said, I'm doing all of the things, why aren't I feeling awesome? And it annoys me that I don't have the answer, but this really takes it, yeah, to that next level. And Such an important conversation. So let's break this down. I know you said with light. So let's start with light. I wanted to go into water first, but you've brought it up. Let's start with light. Why is that important, and how did you go about it in your journey to begin with?
Yeah, I mean, well, light's extremely important. And I started applying light simply by going outside at sunrise. Just basically facing east and staring at the sky. Like my neighbors think I'm a nutcase. And it really started to make a difference. And the reason is that, you know, light, we know, I don't think anyone would argue that light isn't foundational for life on this planet. We think about the fact that we obviously know that plants use light, right? It makes so much sense that, God, nature, however you want to describe it, used light for literally millions of years. And then as humans evolved, what do we think happened? They just said, no, let's reinvent the wheel, right? Let's do something completely different. It's just that we use light differently. And so we need light just in the exact same way. We don't use it to make our own food like plants do. We use it to create time in our body, to signal time in our body, to signal our circadian rhythm. And we use the different colors of light, almost like nutrients, in various ways, especially in the morning, to turn on certain processes, brain neurotransmitter processes, hormonal pathways. We need key light colors, key light frequencies on a regular basis to get all the pathways synced up to the day-night cycle, the circadian cycle that we experience within a 24-hour period.
Right. So in that morning, what are the colors and frequencies that are really important to us that we have to get it in the morning?
Right. Great question, because the morning is key. And the way that the sun comes at us with colors is in a very predictable way, but it changes all throughout the day. I'm sure we've all seen sunlight through a prism, right? It gets shown through a prism and we see the colors of the rainbow. And then we also understand that there's colors outside of the ones that we can visibly see. We have infrared above the red spectrum and ultraviolet below the violet colors. And all of those wavelengths from the infrared all the way through the colors we can see to the ultraviolet are special and important for human life and for life on this planet. Now, in the morning, if I were to take a fancy little meter called a spectrometer that kind of tells me what colors are present, what colors of light, I would hold it out there and I would see the light in the morning at like right before sunrise has tons of red and infrared. Those are wavelengths of light that I absorb into the water in my body, and my mitochondria absorb those wavelengths in order to optimize their function. And I'm sure we've heard the word mitochondria. I used to refer to it, back in high school, as like the powerhouse of the cell, right? It made the ATP. It does so much more than that. But yeah, it needs red light. So if the mitochondria don't get red photons, red light, and infrared, it's almost like we're starving our little powerhouses. We're not giving them the input that they need. So it's beautiful, right? Because we start the day off, we get the red and the infrared that kind of revs things up. And as soon as the sun breaks the horizon, my meter would pick up more of the color blue. And blue gets perceived by these little sensors in my eyes and on my skin. And it really starts my timing mechanism, my time clock for the day. Because the amount of blue light that's coming into my environment, literally it slowly increases from sunrise until when the sun is at its high point in the sky, and then slowly decreases until there's no more at sunset. So it's the perfect timekeeper. So I've got these sensors for these blue light photons all over my body, and I'm no matter depending on how many of those sensors are triggered, tells the time of day, right? And all that information goes to like this master clock in my brain, and it literally communicates that to the rest of my cells. And so all my cellular tasks can sync up based on the amount of blue light in my environment, based on the time of day. And then the sun creeps up just a little bit higher. We would measure it as 10 degrees above the horizon, right? So a little bit higher. And then ultraviolet A comes. And it's a whole nother cascade that happens, right? I start to make neurotransmitters in my brain, like serotonin, like dopamine. I start to make chemicals that make me feel more alert and focused, like adrenaline and noradrenaline. that's when I can actually start to make chemicals that can control various processes that my body needs. So if I have inflammation, I can make a chemical that controls inflammation. If I'm in pain, I can make beta endorphin, right? The runner's high chemical that makes us feel so good. And it's all in response to that morning ultraviolet light. And then lastly, the sun reaches 30 degrees above the horizon, and that's when ultraviolet B. And we all know UVB for vitamin D synthesis, but UVB is also really important for kind of balancing out my steroid hormone production, my sex hormone production. And so that we get this hormone balance at an appropriate time of the day. And that's all just from literally when the sun is like below the horizon to here, right? It's so cool when you start to dive into it, that the layering on of the colors, it signals to my body to do different things.
Oh, there is so much in there. So, question. So you said before the sun has even broke the horizon, we've got red light.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. So this morning to get up for this interview, I was awake before sunrise. And then I've come into this room and I've put on the computer, I've got my ring lights on. So there's all this artificial
you look
light.
Great. You look great, Jackie.
That's what I was going for. That is not the same whatsoever, right? Is this a problem? Should I have gone outside, even though sun's not up, still go outside for 5-10 minutes and then get back in and then then light up this place?
The natural signals from light are always a powerful signal, no matter the time of day that we go outside. So yes, especially if you knew that you were going to kind of shoot your body full of artificial light here. Yeah, it's important. It absolutely is. So then I would really encourage you after this, go outside and tell your body what time of day it is. Right. It is a problem when we do this day in and day out. Like occasionally, no big deal. But picture the number of us who wake up and that's what we do, right? We flood our house full of artificial light, and then we're taught to then on our drive to work to put sunglasses on. So we kind of block the signals that are coming from nature, from the sun. And then we go into an office environment that's fluorescently lit for 8-9 hours. And then we drive home with our sunglasses on. And then we go into our house and make dinner. And then the sun sets. And again, where I live in the middle of winter now, we're getting into the middle of winter. We're in or the middle of fall right now, but it's darker. And so we have sunset, let's say around 7 o'clock. I'm not going to go to bed at 7. So the majority of us just flood our house with light and we stare at an artificially lit television, and then we go to bed and we're kind of wondering why we feel off, why things just don't feel right. And knowing what I know about light, I can really pinpoint, like, it's all about the light.
Absolutely. And it was something that I experienced as well. I moved houses and I'm in a space where there's not a whole heap of natural light. And I found when I was working all day indoors, I just felt awful by the end of the day. Absolutely awful. I have to ask, we've gone into daylight savings now, and I found that I'll start early. So I'm locking myself in this room and it's massage. So it's a little bit dark as well. So I feel like that's kind of messing with me. But anyway, so I'll do this, big day, and then I'll go out. And luckily our lounge area is just completely a floor to ceiling windows. It's beautiful, very light filled. But I'll go out, and because I've been all day in this kind of darkened room, I then get out. It's probably like 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and then this light comes into my brain, my eyeballs, and I'm just like, is this a good thing? Am I messing up what the signals? Like, it's going into evening, I should be like winding down, but I feel like this is giving me energy. Is this wrong?
I mean, I wouldn't say it's wrong, but you are getting those stimulating signals that you should have gotten in the morning, right? Yeah. So I really encourage people, if at all they have the opportunity, to spend as much time outside in the morning as possible. Front load your light. you're going to get such a bigger bang for your buck when you get those morning light frequencies than you would if you were to go outside then from 4 till 7 p.m. or whatever it might look like there. Those are good. Don't get me wrong. They're nice, but you need that energizing burst, and you need that layering on of focus and energy in the morning that you're going to get, so that if you are going to have a time where you're in either what I would call garbage lighting or artificial light or no lighting at all or very dim, make it like, let's say 11 till 3, right? Or like try to condense it, and take little breaks, like a little work, little break, little work, little break, and continue to sync yourself up. But those morning light frequencies are so important. I had to restructure my life over the course of the past 3 years, just knowing what I know. Because as a personal trainer, right, it was like, I owned a gym and I was flipping on all these lights. You're there at 5 o'clock in the morning and you're like, boot camp class, let's go. And so then I started to be in the gym with my like orange blue blockers on. But then there were still overhead artificial lights, and it just didn't sit well with me. Knowing what I knew about circadian rhythm, I'm just like, I got to shift things. I really have to. And it was a huge leap, but gosh, my body feels amazing because of it. And I know that I feel like I'm allowed to now spread the message here. I think it's like, okay, this is my mission now. I don't necessarily need to own a gym anymore. I need to spread the word about light, right? And the quantum healing. So, consistency over perfection, Jackie. I'm not telling people that they have to live their whole lives outside, but if we can prioritize those morning wavelengths of light, it's key.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, okay, so when people are out there, they've gone outside in the morning, how long should they be spending out there?
That depends on how, for lack of a better word, messed up someone's circadian rhythm is, right? If you feel like you're one of those people who doesn't want to fall asleep before midnight, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, and you want to sleep in until hours after sunrise, you got to spend a little more time out there. But what I've seen, some of my tech executive clients, and just also from research on people who consider themselves night owls, in the course of a 3-day camping trip, they can recover their circadian rhythms, 70% or more of their circadian rhythm. So it's like being very diligent for a short window of time. And then you just got to do consistent little exposures, 3 minutes at sunrise, maybe a 20-minute walk when that UVA light is there. And then it works for you. Your lighting is working for you.
Yeah, brilliant. And did you say it took 3 days to reset?
At a camping trip, like if someone's gonna say, okay, I'm gonna commit to this and have almost like a camp from home experience, never turn on a single light. The weather here is not great for that, but I encourage people in like June, right? June here, or maybe even June through September, just windows open, no lights on, allow the natural fluctuations to happen in your environment of light. You can sync right back up very quickly.
Yeah, brilliant. You mentioned the mitochondria. Let's break this down for those who are hearing it for the first time. Sure. What is it and why is it important for our bodies?
Inside of all of our cells need energy, right? They need energy to function. And when cells can't make enough energy, then it's like a cell phone battery that's drained. It can last up to a point. The cell can function up to a point, but once a certain drainage of energy has happened, things are going to happen in my cell phone. The screen is going to dim. I'm not going to be able to download something, a large file or a large video. I'm not going to be able to live stream anything. I can't use the flash on my camera. And so those are all things that the cell phone does to conserve energy, to make that battery energy last as long as possible. My cells have 100,000 things they're trying to accomplish every single second. And that's a lot of energy requirements. And as my energy production in the cell starts to drain and drain and drain and drain, there reaches a level where the cell has to say, I can't accomplish everything. I don't have enough energy to accomplish everything. I have to start picking and choosing. And then there reaches and so things start to shut down. It's like, okay, I'm not going to take care of that. I'm not going to tidy up these proteins in the same way, or I'm not going to worry about this particular signaling. then you actually reach an even lower threshold where the cell can't meet energetic demands and you start to get symptoms. So you start to get this. So wherever the mitochondria are not producing enough energy, if it's in your brain, it could look like something like Alzheimer's disease. It could look like, in your heart, it could look like chronic heart or congestive heart failure. In your muscles, it could just look like chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia. And so what we've given as a diagnosable disease is simply the area of your body in which the mitochondria aren't functioning to make enough energy for that tissue. And so mitochondria are of utmost importance because they're the ones that are responsible for really converting electrons into energy.
Is there a way to tell if, I mean, besides these physical symptoms, is there a way to tell whether our mitochondria are in good health?
In a clinical lab research setting, they're using a couple of different testing markers that are not available to the public yet. So I think we're close to being able to assess mitochondrial health, how fit our mitochondria are, if you will, but not yet. So we really just have to go based on symptoms of things like fatigue or pain, or even stiffness. Actually, is an indication that our mitochondria aren't working well. I'm sure as a massage therapist, right? You've had those clients who come back and it's like, I'm always stiff here. I'm always stiff
totally.
here. In the process of making energy, the mitochondria make water. And so if a tissue isn't hydrated, like you can feel that dehydrated tissue. If the tissue's not hydrated, that's an area where the mitochondria aren't making water well enough.
Well, I'm so excited to dive into this water part. But before we do, red light therapy. Is this the same? I mean, obviously, there's the red light you mentioned before sunrise, but is this as good as sunlight if we're not able to get out there for any reason?
Interesting. Nothing is as good as sunlight, right? Because when the sun has red and infrared, it also has other colors just in dimmer ways, right? So red sunlight always contains a bigger blend of colors. And when you get a red light therapy device, you're getting maybe 2 key wavelengths of red light and 2 key wavelengths of infrared, near infrared, which are beneficial, right? I think red light therapy is beautiful as a therapy, right? It's not a substitute for going outside to set your circadian rhythm. But what we are lacking living indoors these days, behind modern glass and under modern lighting, those things block or are deficient in the red light and the infrared, which we now know if my mitochondria are basically starving for those frequencies, red light therapy can be very beneficial, especially for the whole body, or like spot treated on a tissue, to support mitochondrial health and mitochondrial energy production. Just because living indoors, we don't have access to those frequencies in the same way we would if we were living outside.
Okay. And we said that mitochondria health, if they're starving of light, we need to go outside.
Yeah. We basically, going outside is the easiest way to do it. Absolutely. But mitochondria require a couple of key inputs and they make a couple of key outputs, right? For this. So the things that the mitochondria make for us that we've already talked about, they make water. They make something that most people would call our main energy currency. I don't, but it's ATP. So they make water, they make ATP. The mitochondria also make carbon dioxide that we breathe out, but we do other things with it. And the mitochondria make infrared light as well. The inputs so that the mitochondria can make that are the mitochondria need electrons, red light photons, and oxygen, right? So we have to make sure we're breathing in oxygen and delivering it to the mitochondria. Mitochondria need electrons. Mitochondria need the red light photons to be as efficient as possible at basically making those outputs. When we have all of that working, it's a beautiful thing, right? The cell is as energetically favorable as possible. When we're lacking in those things, or we're actually doing things that maybe harm our mitochondria, because there's substances in this planet that are toxic to mitochondria. when we're exposed to those things as well, we're going to be low on the output. And when we're low on the output, that can look like a lot of different things in terms of mitochondrial dysfunction and diseases or symptoms that can manifest.
Yes. Okay, so let's talk about water, because obviously that is very important to mitochondrial health. What are the basics that we need to know?
Okay, so the basics are, we've all heard we have to be hydrated, right? Like we all heard, like, you got to be hydrated, drink plenty of water. And I actually argue that yes, the water we drink is very important, but it's more important to understand the water that our mitochondria make. That is true intracellular hydration, true deep, deep hydration. That water is so amazing because the water inside of our bodies is different than water in a glass, right? Like water in a glass sloshes around. It's like this liquid structure. And most of us, again, what this goes back a ways. Like, I don't know when the first time I learned that water can exist as a liquid, a solid, and a gas. But water can also, now we know, inside of our bodies exist in a fourth phase that has been called many names. It's been called structured water. It's been called exclusion zone or EZ water. It's been called interfacial water. But what you need to know about it is that the water inside of our body organizes and structures it, the oxygens and the hydrogens, in a way that actually provides our body with energy.
Okay.
I mean, I can go on.
I think we need to. It provides. Okay, that kind of makes sense in terms of the energy, but then does it? Because I feel like it flips everything I've also learned.
It has, right? I have had to do such an unlearning process throughout all this. And, at first you're like, what the heck is this person talking about? And then you're like, oh, it kind of makes sense. And then you're just like, it's like you just kind of stare at the wall and you're like, oh my gosh, light bulb moment. It's like,
my whole life I've been lied to.
I know, exactly. And so here's the deal, right? If everyone knows water as being H2O, very simple molecule. And honestly, what's crazy is that if you were to line up literally every molecule in a body, 99 out of every 100 molecules would be water. Water is so integral, right? And we've been studying, when I was in undergrad and even in grad school, I was literally studying the one molecule, like the macro molecule, the protein, the important ones. And we completely ignored all the water. And now we know it's the water that drives the show. The water is the most important. And so here's how, right? Water in a glass is H2O. And what I liken it to is you have one oxygen and then you got two little hydrogens attached to it. And when you look at, if you were to take water in a liquid in a glass and look at it under kind of like a molecular microscope, you'd see these H2O molecules interacting with other H2O molecules, almost kind of like a random nightclub. It's like, I'm dancing with this person, I'm dancing with that person, I'm going to bump into this person, I'm going to bump into that person, And so that's water in a glass. It's pretty random arrangement of the molecules. But water inside of our bodies, the H's and the O's organize themselves into hexagons. And they so picture almost like a very rigid dance, right? Where it's like these molecules know exactly where they need to go and they're kind of shifting. So I'm kind of holding hands with other molecules in a circle and making a hexagon, and I'm kind of shifting back and forth, but I'm structured. I have order and structure. I can't be all wiggly, dance with this partner, dance with that partner. I have to stay in my structure. And in order to form these rings, these ring-shaped structures inside of our bodies, they have to kick out a hydrogen. And so when they kick out that hydrogen, it actually transforms the charge of water, which in a glass, it's neutral. Water doesn't have a negative or a positive charge. Water in our bodies, when we kick out that hydrogen, it becomes negatively charged. And the hydrogen, I say the hydrogen feels left out. So they line up right along the edge of the dancers, these structured dancers, and they just sit there. And hydrogen is basically a proton. Hydrogen is the most simple atom on the periodic table. It's basically just a proton. It's positively charged. So you have this structured, negatively charged water and this proton lineup right next to it. If you were to take little what are called electrodes and put them into the negative charged structured zone and the positively charged proton zone, you'd light up a light bulb. So you have potential energy in that. And this water structure and this water battery forms everywhere in the body that there is a hydrophilic or water loving surface, which is every protein, membrane, molecule, organelle. It's everywhere, in other words. So that's the energy in our body, and it's from the water structuring itself into a battery.
That was so beautifully explained. I'm getting tears in my eyes. Honestly, that was just brilliant. And I love how you say, like, we've been focusing on those macros, the protein. And it's like, well, we all know that you can stop eating for, whatever it is, weeks or something, but stop drinking water and your body just won't survive.
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
wow, that was perfectly explained. I love that analogy. And I'm going to
Cool.
use that forever. Right. So here in Adelaide, we are renowned for our not so nice drinking water, tap water. It's safe, obviously, but it's not great. Um, and so obviously that's been treated so we can drink it. But I've heard the term hard water and soft water. What does this mean, and what does that mean for our body and our, that cellular process?
The water that we drink is very important as well,
Mm.
because we will absorb it. It will become part of the blood fluid. It'll become part of the lymphatic fluid, the water that goes in and then becomes structured water next to cells. Like on the outside of the cells, we have this structured water. So it is very important. Now, here's the deal. Water in nature, this is the journey that water in nature takes. And I hope that comparison between water in nature that we would get from like a natural spring versus what we do to our water now, and I'm hoping it's going to become kind of glaringly obvious. Water in nature goes through a complete hydrological cycle. It basically goes under the earth. It's deep in the earth, and as it's down there, it has to kind of push and weave its way up. It weaves around rocks and different mineral layers, and then it comes it comes up higher and higher, and it weaves, and then it's going to in the process, sometimes it goes down a little stream, right, in an ocean or a stream, and then it's under the light of the sun. It feels the pull of the moon with the tide, right? Water in nature imbibes itself with all of the trace minerals found on planet Earth, all of the minerals. And in the process of kind of making its way up to the surface and eventually getting to a source where it's able to be consumed, it also picks up frequency information. It picks up the all of the different lunar cycles. It picks up all of the different solar spectrum, all the different wavelengths of light and frequency that have been on the earth. And we then, when it comes to us, we drink water that's really been both rich in minerals and imprinted with healing information. um, you People have studied even like these healing springs and these healing rivers, like Lourdes, for example, these holy sites. And they found that this water, when you actually flash freeze it under a microscope, you can look at it. It creates what are called these beautiful coherent crystals. You are flash freezing pretty much the dancers in their configuration, like frozen in time, and they're striking their best pose possible. Whereas if you were to flash freeze water that we push through pipes and we've treated with chemicals to get rid of the bacteria, we've filtered out some of the toxins, not all. We don't want you to complain about what your hair looks like, so we might add different minerals, like back in mineral salts and things into it. We pressure push it down right angle pipes, from these, and force it into this wading pool essentially, and then it comes out the faucet. That water, when it's flash frozen, doesn't form it doesn't form any organization at all. It really just looks like a blob, if you will. It looks like, you're like, if you were to look down at at a club and you just see no rhyme or reason, as opposed to if you were to look at the Nutcracker ballet where everyone is kind of in a perfect position in relationship with each other. And so the water that we need to drink is that structured, organized, coherent, imprinted, imbibed, mineral rich water that comes from nature. Whereas water that's been gone through the municipal treating system, it really experiences trauma. And I
Yeah.
never would have said that if I hadn't studied water this deeply, but it does, to the extent that water actually remembers when it's been forced through right angles. There's research that shows it knows when, because water in nature never takes right angles. It meanders and curves and swirls. It doesn't get pressure pushed. And so the water that we drink, if we drink it straight out of the tap, yes, is it safe for human consumption? I would assume so. Yes, very much so. Is it necessarily the type of water that really imbibes our body with hydration and minerals and information? No.
That is so interesting, and so interesting that you've used the term trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Firstly, I mean, I want to ask, how does the water know that it's been through this? And secondly, the experiment popped into my head where people have put, water in two jars, and on one jar it's got written really positive affirmations, and on the other jar it's negative. Oh no, sorry, that's not water. It's an apple. It's an apple in a jar.
But apples are water. Apples are full of water. It's the water. The water imprints memory. This is not this is, I mean, there's tons of research on this. It's the basis for homeopathy, frankly, but water has a memory. It can memorize frequencies and it knows what's happening in its environment. That's so woo to say, right? Like I'm such a science brain and it's so woo to say, but it's so true to the extent that a researcher named Masaru Emoto, he put 3 jars of rice soaked in water on a shelf. And every morning he would say something to each jar. The first jar, I love you. The second jar, you disgust me. And he ignored the third jar. After months, right, of doing that on a daily basis, this first jar made beautiful fermented rice water and almost like a vinegar rice water, smelled beautiful. It was bubbling up, meaning it was rich in probiotic bacteria that were just, really culturing this rice beautifully. The middle one rotted, the one that he had said, you disgust me, and the other one just turned black. The one that he ignored. So it's the water that's picking up frequency. And what is frequency? Well, frequency, sure, it can be the sun, but it could be words, thoughts, emotions. All of those things are just varying frequencies, varying vibrations, and the water picks those up. Hence why I'm a firm believer in positive self-talk. I don't just think it's like, oh yeah, I'm great. I don't just think it's like a thing. I think that I'm truly structuring and influencing the water network of my body, and it matters, right? That matters because it makes a body that much more what we in the quantum world will call coherent and functioning and just well able to move energy and to imbibe it with information, and that's what the body wants. So water is amazing.
That was incredible. Yes, words, language, thoughts matter. It all
They
matters.
do. And there's enough experimentation with water that has shown that to be true. Even just other ones. I don't know if you're familiar, but Veda, I don't know, do you know Veda Austin?
Mm-mm.
And please forgive me. She's either in Australia or New Zealand, and I'm certain that that's the horrible thing to say. Please forgive me. Or she's from there originally. I think she lives in the States now, but she actually teaches courses in something called water crystallography, where she teaches you, you take a petri dish of water and you set it on a picture from a book, or you think a thought, or you write a word, and then you flash freeze it, and the water will show you its representation of what it saw in its environment. And you look at it the first couple of times, you're like, yeah, that could be anything. You see the thousands of studies that have been done, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's so amazing.
That is incredible. So could we potentially heal the water that's been treated before it enters
Yeah,
our body?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what I encourage people to do. As a worst case scenario, you have to imprint that water with love. You have to imbibe it with love. You have to give it a new memory, basically, because what it knows is it was traumatized, and it has to feel love so that you can imbibe yourself with that frequency. I know of a woman who was kind of at her wit's end for her health journey, and she hated herself. She hated herself. And one day she woke up and she decided that she was just going to start to imbibe love into her water, but she had no love for herself. The only love she could give to the water was the love that she had for her spouse and her kids. And so she did. She just thought about how much she loved them before she drank this glass of water. And she drank it and fell violently ill. She writhed and screamed, and she just felt like her body was releasing just this stored, pent up trauma, shame, anger, frustration. It was just kind of starting to move in her body. And she was like, whoa, like that was a reaction. And she knew something was happening, and she did it every single time. She drank water, to the extent that, months later, she started loving herself and was able to imbibe her own love into the water. All of her physical ailments went away. It just became like this beautiful, glorious, loving human being who loved herself, loved her family, loved her life. And it was because she literally imbibed love into the water that she drank.
Well, there's a perfect message right there. So what happens if we're not doing this to our water? Like, how does our body adapt to drinking water that is not structured? And we could go as far as to say not quite getting the light that we need either.
Well, with the water that is not structured, I mean, tap water has a couple of issues. Number one, it still has toxins in it, right? I don't know about I like you said, yours isn't necessarily the best drinking water. Here in Kalamazoo, we don't have the best drinking water either. It's free of bacteria, but every 5 years or so you hear, oh yeah, PFAS, the forever chemical, was found in the water, or chloramines or something, another chemical was found in the water. And while it's not immediately toxic, those do contribute to mitochondrial dysfunction. Those sorts of chemicals that we can find in our drinking water can certainly cause the mitochondria to suffer. And then in terms of the drinking water, if it's not, even if it's not structured, that's okay. Like, we can survive. But what I think happens, the majority of us have experienced some form of trauma or another throughout our lives. And that holds itself as a memory, and it stores itself in the structured water as a memory in our body. And when we are around something else traumatic, it's almost like if we've experienced a trauma and then you hear about a similar trauma on the news, or you read about a similar trauma in the paper, it almost reactivates things for you, right? Traumatized water doesn't do anything for helping the trauma, because it's holding an energetic frequency of fear and pain. I can't speak for the water, maybe anger, who knows, right? But I don't think it's beneficial, because the body works on resonance. The body works on almost like a tuning fork effect, where literally every single one of my cells and all the molecules, they're all vibrating a certain frequency. And certain frequencies, once they vibrate the right frequency, all the other molecules in the body that need to hear that frequency hear it. Just as if I were to strike this tuning fork here, all the other tuning forks tuned to that note would also start to resonate in the room. My body is the same way. And we now know, entrain or strengthen certain tuning forks with sounds of nature. So being by running water, or being by an ocean, or hearing bird song, all of those things can actually strengthen the key frequencies that my cells need, my molecules need, my cell receptors and proteins need. But the opposite is also true. If I have cells that are dysfunctional, receptors that are dysfunctional, and I add more dysfunctional vibrations onto it, I can strengthen that resonance. And so, is it something that's am I gonna wake up tomorrow if I drink my tap water and have a massive issue? No. But is it overall contributing to potentially a lack of healing, or a lack of feeling great, or feeling like I'm thriving, or a lack of positivity? Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's the problem at the end of the day, isn't it? There's so many instances, and myself included, where I've gone, I feel awful, but I can't pinpoint a certain thing that's done it. It's just this process that's happened over time. And yeah, all of these, I used to be a big tap drinker, because it was easy and convenient. And yeah, and there was just so much in my life happening. And I just thought, I feel awful. What am I doing wrong?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I also have to ask, so we're talking a lot about the water that we consume. What about the external, our external environment, in terms of, like, obviously, yes, the tap water as we wash our hands, but also that we shower in as well. Like, is that having the same sort of impact on our body as the water we drink?
Yes and no. I mean, we will, if there's toxins in that tap water, we will absorb some of them through the skin. So in and of itself, we can create a more toxic burden in our body by bathing in water that still has chlorine, PFAS, endocrine disruptors, things like that. So yes, more likely to absorb those things as we immediately ingest it. So I would always say drinking that water is way more, has the potential to be way more negatively impactful than bathing in it. But yeah, I think it's important to understand that water matters. And we do what we can, so layer on little things and do what we can. But I also am a firm believer that fear and this idea of perfectionism is equally unattainable and not healthy. So knowledge, just knowing, is an interesting thing, because then we can start to shift little bitty habits or little things. I look back on my 10-year health journey and it's like, oh my gosh, I've changed so much. I literally filled like 4 notebook pages with stuff that I've changed and shifted. And if I would have given that to myself 10 years ago, I'd have been like, there's no way.
Exactly.
I'm not even starting. I'm failing before I even begin.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I think we have to look at it as like little 2% shifts, little changes here and there that add up and they accumulate, and you start to reach this tipping point. And for me, light was a massive tipping point. Water was a massive tipping point in my healing journey. And now it's just like, I want to do all these things because I
Yeah.
feel so good.
Exactly. It's that feeling, isn't it? And you are a walking advertisement for all of this, because I know you said, you had a child 11 years ago now, and you look like you're 20. Incredible. So
Thank you.
you're doing all the right things. So we
Listen,
too can look at
I
20.
appreciate that. I have 3 children, and they would say otherwise. They'd be
What do
like,
they know?
"You're so old, Mom." It's like, that's based on the music I like. Okay, I don't think
Exactly.
right.
You mentioned chlorine, and this just popped into my head. Swimmers who are spending hours in the pool from a very young age as well. What is this doing?
It from the quantum world, it changes water's electrical carrying capacity. Water, we conduct electricity through this water in our bodies, and chlorine starts to disrupt that. Chlorine also competes with other places in the body that use iodine. So thyroid function can start to be impacted. A process called apoptosis, which is programmed cell death, which is an important thing. If a cell thinks that, oh my goodness, I'm starting to proliferate uncontrollably, the cell has a program it can run to kind of just get rid of itself for the betterment of the tissue. Iodine is needed for that. Iodine is needed for appropriate estrogen receptor signaling. So for hormonal based cancers, you're looking at like, you're like, wait a second. So, it's just another place where we could be exposed to toxins and just have to be aware of it, right? We just have to be aware of it. Now, I don't know, it's a hard question, because if one of my kids came to me and they're like, Mom, I love swimming, I want to be a competitive swimmer, I want to swim every day of my life, I don't think I would stop them, because I think that passion and that love and that drive and the competitiveness and the teamwork and the ability to, set a goal and accomplish it, I think all of those can help to structure the water in our body to almost withstand consequences from excessive fluorine, or I'm sorry, chlorine, fluoride too, but chlorine. So yeah, I think it's not an all or nothing. I think it's a case by case situation, and you kind of have to look at it like that, and then maybe look at other areas of your life where you can support your healing journey in a way that you're not providing more toxins into your body.
Yeah, yeah. So can we talk about that for a moment? Like, what would that look like for the swimmers out there who are like, okay, I need to incorporate something else into my life to kind of help what that's doing, you know?
Well, then I'm always a fan of things like the red light therapy. I think the red light
Mm,
therapy can be a very good way to support mitochondrial health, can support uh, certain antioxidant production in the body, really key. Like our mitochondria makes melatonin inside of our cells. It's not the pineal melatonin, it's cellular melatonin, which can kind of soak up reactive oxygen species or inflammation. Sauna, I'm a fan of sauna because I think that people can use it to really start to sweat out a lot of the toxins that we're exposed to. And then in a situation like that, knowing iodine is so key, I would just make sure that they're consuming adequate sources of iodine rich foods like seafood, seaweed, those sorts of things to help support that iodine process in the body.
yeah, brilliant. I've read this in the past. I forget where I found it. It was from you. It might have been on your website, or you may have said it, and I'd love for you to break it down for us. The
Sure, sure.
fuel doesn't matter if the engine is broken. I
Yeah,
really love this.
absolutely.
Can you explain what you mean by that?
Sure. So mitochondria, they're like engines, right? They basically combust electrons, or they convert electrons into energy. And we, being a trained nutritionist, the nutrition world is all about eat this, don't eat that, do this diet, don't do that diet, count these macros, glucose bad, glucose good, fat bad, fat good. And I say none of it matters until your electrons can use, I'm sorry, until your mitochondria can use what those foods break down into, which is electrons, and can transform those electrons into energy. So I think it's foolish to really to kind of attach yourself to one diet plan or one nutrition mantra if your mitochondria aren't functioning at their best anyways. So I always say you have to fix your engines first. And the analogy that I also like to use to drive this home is picture having two different cars, right? Two Ferraris, even like two super fancy cars. One of them has a broken engine. We know that Ferraris run on premium gasoline, right? They need the top of the line fuel to go to, inside of their engines. And so it doesn't matter if you put top of the line gasoline into that Ferrari with the broken engine, that car is not going to work for you, right? You're not going to drive from point A to point B. Now picture the second car. The engine is immaculate, right? It is well tuned. It's gotten every single tune up it needed from the dealership. And you drive up to a gas station, and all it has is the lowest class of gasoline. Guess what? You put that low class gasoline into that car, it's still going to run. It's still going to take you from point A to point B. Using bad gasoline in the long run might ultimately create more damage in the engine, right? It might wear it down. But in the meantime, it's going to take you where you need to go. So when your mitochondria are really, really efficient, you can actually eat more garbage foods even. And I don't recommend it, but you can, because you can handle it. You can handle bad fuel if you've got really good mitochondria. If you've got bad mitochondria, your fuel, it's really arbitrary at that point, because your mitochondria are going to be inefficient at creating energy no matter what.
Mm. But at the end of the day, you still need that good fuel, right? Because
The,
longevity wise.
Well, at the end of the day, absolutely, right? Absolutely, you need it, because in the process of eating good fuel, you're also, like you said, turning on more longevity genes. You're avoiding the inflammatory reaction that can happen when you eat processed foods, fried foods, and stuff like that. But it really just drives home that I just find the arguments a bit short-sighted, right? Like the diet argument, it's just a bit short-sighted at first, because yes, in the perfect world, what we're doing is we're fixing those engines so that they're immaculate, and we're giving them the right fuel. And that right there is like you're driving the best Ferrari possible, and it's not going to break down.
Yeah, yeah. And that's why I loved this so much, because there have been many times where in my life I thought I was doing the right thing, consuming the right amount of water and, a diet that's really good. But I just felt like my body wasn't taking to any of it. I felt like I was constantly on the toilet weighing it all out and nothing was just being absorbed. And I still felt awful. So this is
Yeah.
such an important message. And so you would say, or could we say that getting your sunlight and drinking structured water?
Getting some, so the best things you can do for those mitochondrial
Mm,
engines and for your circadian rhythm and body in general is getting that sunlight, drinking as best quality water as you can, and then being in a frequency environment that's dominated by things like love and the sounds of nature and gratitude and joy and
yes.
laughter and nice music that makes you feel good, as opposed to, unfortunately, what we're around the majority of the time, which is the buzz of fluorescent lights, a Wi-Fi router right next to us, and maybe a construction site that's, they're doing construction on the highway down the road.
Mm,
We kind of have to just flip all that on its head and understand that we may still have the Wi-Fi router. Let's turn off the artificial light. Let's put on music that makes us happy. Let's talk with a coworker that brings us joy as opposed to a coworker that's always trying to gossip, and really understand what our frequency environment is like too.
that's quite hilarious because everything you mentioned is happening or was happening where we're living right now. We've got the lights, we've got the router, there's construction right outside on the road, drilling, ripping up the concrete. It's just like, oh goodness. But that's gone now, so things are feeling better.
Yeah, but they do feel better, don't they? It's
Totally.
it's amazing. You don't
Absolutely.
realize it until it's gone though. Like it's like you
Exactly.
can you can push through. Humans are so good at adapting. We can
Hmm.
push through, but it's not until it's gone that you realize how much better you could be feeling.
Yes. Yeah,
And so
exactly. Absolutely. Carrie, this has been sensational and I could pick your brain for hours. We won't do that to you. How can people find out more about you and your work? Because I know you've got some incredible resources on your website as well.
Yes. So the best way, if you like this stuff, Instagram is a really good place to get started. I post there all the time, and I just little like it's, well, not little for Instagram. I take up the full caption, if you will, but like but little for me because I could write for days on this stuff. But it's a really good place to start connecting the dots between light and how to use light and the water and the mitochondria and earthing and all those, getting back into nature, all the stuff that I think is so important. So following me on Instagram, Carrie B Wellness, and then I do in my Instagram profile, I've got my link tree. It's loaded, right? I've got courses that a course that I teach. If you want to apply this in your life, I've got what I call my signature course, Quantum Foundations, and so that's a great place to dive into how to use all this information. I will still teach you some science because it's me. I can't just skip a little of the science. I can't just skip the science. And then I've also teach a certification course for practitioners, people who are doing exactly what you're doing. You're a massage therapist or someone who's a chiropractor or does traditional Chinese medicine. And it's just about understanding how this makes what you currently do that much more successful. And so there's also information about that as well.
That's amazing. I'll be looking into that for sure. I'd love to. So I know we've only just scratched the surface, and I'm so appreciative of your time today. This was sensational. For those who want to apply something straight away after they've finished listening to this episode, what can they do that's really simple and easy to do right now?
Go for a morning walk, even if it's 10 minutes, as many days a week as you can.
Brilliant. Carrie, thank you so much for your time. This has been wonderful.
Oh, thank you, Jackie. I've had a blast chatting with you. I appreciate it.
That was Carrie Bennett, quantum biologist and overall incredible human. And one thing that blew my mind was the red light before sunrise. Now, my alarm goes off at 6 a.m. and it's still dark. And my brain's like, well, There's no light, so there's no benefit of getting up right now, which is what I'm telling myself so that I can stay in my bed, cozy and sleepy. But in saying that, I'm really glad to learn that getting up and getting out there, even before sunrise, is super beneficial and important to our body and cellular health. So, unfortunately, there are no more excuses for me. But I would love to know what your takeaways were and what you feel you need to change in your routine, because it's so easy to think that we have everything covered and thought out. And sometimes it only takes one simple little tweak and change that can have a profound effect. So I'd love to hear your thoughts and takeaways from today's episode. If you loved this episode, tell everyone you know so they too can reap the benefits of sunlight and structured water. And if you feel like it, I would really appreciate it if you gave this episode a review, because it really does help get this important information out to people just like you. Thank you so much for listening today. I'm truly grateful for you. Take care, stay awesome, and I'll catch you in the next one.